Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of FaB GaB. That's the name of the show. And I really am excited to have my guest on today, special guest Bob Koenig, who has a similar interest that I have in the Beatles collecting, and he's got quite a collection. And we're basically going to be talking about, Beatles exploitation stuff. And before I get into that, let me just show you this issue of Retro Fan here. And this is the issue number 28, September and October of 2023. Bob has an article in here that he wrote called Beatles Exploitation. I like that there. Beatles Exploitation.
Thanks.
And you can see all the albums. He'll be showing you some albums. Bob, welcome to the
Yes,
show.
yes.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you for inviting me on.
Okay. And first, let me say that I myself, like you have, amassed quite a collection of stuff. I know I don't have every one of them. There's probably arguably, maybe one or two here or there you don't have that I do, and vice versa. Because I've seen you show some, and some of them I didn't have. I don't yet. I don't think.
It's hard to keep a checklist of all that stuff, but I tried to, and especially with the magazine article, stay in the realm of 1964, just to show how much material came out in 1 year. And I was basically looking into just the LPs
Yeah.
alone. Now, I wasn't even going into the 45 market or the EPs or the magazines and the memorabilia. This was just LP albums alone.
And that's so much fun stuff there too with the 45s and all the things that came out. I just am fascinated by it. All the 45 knockoffs, things that were done to ride the coattails of the Beatles and Beatlemania in 1964 and the LPs especially. And it's amazing how many there are, right?
Definitely, definitely. And not just your budget labels, but the major labels as well. They use the 1 year, and they took off the 1 year and did as much as they possibly could to put different things out.
Now, besides, I mean, obviously making money is the main idea, but do you think the idea was to kind of trick parents into thinking it was the Beatles, or is that just something that happened, but it wasn't planned that way?
I would say, if from my evaluation, it was partly that. Um, partly that, be it uh, the real commercial albums or not. Um, if you well, if you were around back then, adults bought the LP 33 and a third, but before the Beatles, I mean, Elvis and Four Seasons, Beach Boys, and so forth, they sold, but they were also very 45 based groups on hit singles. So
Hmm.
it was the hit singles that more or less sold, and the albums were like a secondary thing. Or it was something, well, you got a nice picture of the artist and you got a chance to hear a few more songs. But what you really wanted to hear was the song that was the hit. The big sellers before that time that in LPs were especially soundtrack albums. You look on your Billboard charts or Record World charts. It was all these soundtracks, The Sound of Music, right?
Yep.
All those kind of things were very popular. Late 50s, early 60s, when stereo started to come in, that was very popular in your classical albums.
Hmm.
And that was very popular in, if you've heard of exotica music or bachelor pad music, where
Sure.
they had the stereo stuff. I have these records called like stereo action, where it sounds like, the sound is going back and forth like a ping pong table from
Yeah.
speaker to speaker. Well, it wasn't like that yet in pop music. Most of your 45s until probably the late 60s and beyond were usually in mono.
Mm.
So, the kids or the teen buying audience was basically used to mono.
Mhm.
even though we know albums came out in stereo.
Right. Well,
So you have that sort of background.
well, how would you say you came about to get interested in this particular thing, which Beatles exploitation albums of the Beatles by other people? How would you say you started it, getting interested?
Right, right. Um, those who know me know I collect many things.
Okay.
I'm into some comic books where they were put out by some sort of offshoot uh, publisher or something trying to make a buck on the superhero craze. So they threw out a couple of issues, but they really were kind of trashy. But
Mm,
I don't know. I enjoyed those kind of things, and uh, Beatles. Well, I have a big collection of the old Beatle bootleg albums, and that's something you could say is exploitive in a way, but they really were put out more for the fans to buy that would normally buy all the other stuff too.
mm,
Um, some of the things that I'll be discussing and showing were things that probably the your Beatle fan really really didn't want, but they
uh,
ended up with it anyway.
I don't know. Some of those bootlegs, some Beatles fans, bootlegs wise, aren't really interested. They don't touch bootlegs. Me, I couldn't get enough of those things. All right, when you could get Five Nights in a Judo Arena or Live at the Hollywood Bowl early before it came out, legitimately, Sweet Apple Tracks. We can do a bootleg show maybe one day
Oh,
too,
definitely,
if you
definitely.
like, and we could have some fun with that. But I don't want to get too far
No,
off the topic
no.
before I get into the topic. But I wanted to let's just talk a little bit about. I understand that you're a musician and you have some material out, right?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I had a band in the '80s called the Keys, and we even played. We were on national TV. We were on Dance Party USA on the USA Network in 1988. We played a lot in New York City. I was even in a comic book. We were featured
Oh,
in a comic book. We had a record inserted in the comic book, uh, sort of like a Mad Magazine with the flexi.
yes, yes. Oh,
And
cool. Cool.
I put out some other stuff as well. I even had one disc, which is basically a town tribute, but here it is, Abbey Lane, and I'm walking across
Yep, there it is.
the
Yeah, it's a little tricky with the camera. Yeah, there you go. You go the opposite way. Yeah, that's good. That's good. That looks nice. And where is that taken? That's taken locally from you,
That's
isn't it?
taken on Abbey Lane in Levittown.
Levittown Abbey Lane, okay, Long Island, New York. All right, how cool is that? All right, well, all right, that's pretty cool too. So you're really a man of all trades. You're into so it's not just collecting, of course, that you're into all music. All right,
Right,
so
right. Oh,
all
wow.
right, well, where do we begin? I know you have a bunch of stuff to show. Do you want to guide us through
Yeah,
with
well,
this?
we really begin with the fact that once Beatlemania hit over here and the Beatles were on Ed Sullivan, everybody was rushing to put out whatever material they possibly could. The earliest label to have the Beatles here in America was VJ Records,
Mhm.
and they, of course, everybody I think must have a copy of this somewhere
Yeah,
or another,
yeah,
and of course this has been copied and faked so
mm,
many times too, but there are many authentic ones still around.
yeah.
Uh, this covers kind of uh, plain. It's a really early picture of the band. It doesn't really show the potential of what they could be, but this was the first album, and the back is sort of basic.
You got the Please Please Me
This
one.
is the second copy.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, and VJ, as we're going to see, I'm sure, right? Themselves rode on the Beatles.
Went like
Coattail.
crazy with what they had. So of course, before that came out, Capitol was offered. The Capitol is the Beatles' main label
Right.
in America,
Yeah,
and
right.
also in Canada and Mexico. But they were offered here many times, and they kept turning them down. That's how they got on the VJ. So then once um, Capitol got a hold of them, out came this album, which I think I don't
I've
think
never seen that one before. That's very interesting.
I don't think we've ever seen an accurate count of how many of these things actually sold. I
Mhm.
mean, Capitol was so crazy at getting this thing out. They went to your local mom and pop record pressing plant, threw, let's say, 500 jackets and 1,000 labels, and just said, "Here, press this and get it out there."
Mhm.
And so you see all different types of pressings and quality of vinyl on this album. This one, the actual record doesn't even have the ASCAP or BMI
Oh,
listing.
that's a rare one.
And that was a real rush to get that out.
Yeah.
But this cover is very, very busy. The Meet the Beatles turns up almost like a press kit, if you were. But of course, now we had the introducing the Beatles, but Meet the Beatles says the first album by England's
Right.
top phenomenal
The
comedy.
first album on Capitol, that is. You mean?
Right, right, and that's where the craziness starts to happen. Then we have the Beatles' second album.
Mhm.
Wait a minute, Mom, Dad, I don't know if I know how to add. We have
Yeah.
introducing Meet the Beatles, and now this says it's the second album. Isn't that
Yeah.
three albums?
Right.
And even this gets confusing because it has She Loves You on it, but She Loves You came out on Swan
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
45.
Yeah. Amazing to me that it didn't do anything great. I mean, at or the first came out. I mean, that's crazy to me. It should have been a real monster. I always thought that song.
Definitely, definitely. Uh, then, of course, you got United Artists gets into the act with the Hard Day's Night. So remember what I mentioned about soundtracks? Well,
Yes.
here you go. This was an actual Beatles soundtrack in America. Uh, of course, it was spliced with just a few regular songs, and the rest is instrumental.
Hmm.
But this cover set a standard, which is similar
Iconic. Yeah.
with some of the other things. So
The haircut, famous haircuts.
yeah, so even though uh, it's kind of a butchered, as I would say, album, it kind of set a certain way to go. But then you had something new by the Beatles, also on Capitol. And wait a minute, some of these songs I already have on the Hard Days Night
Yeah,
sound.
what's up with that, right? We didn't figure out about we didn't think Capital United Artists so much then, right? To a kid, really,
Right.
you're not thinking that.
So you can see how uh, mothers, the kids, could easily get confused.
Sure.
Uh, of course, there was a few other Capitol albums that came out in '64 as well, but the craziness also continued with VJ. VJ was only able to have that one album, and even when their contract was over, they still kept putting out other releases as fast as they could. Like they went
Mm.
to crazy ideas like Beatles versus the Four Seasons,
Yeah, right.
which I don't know. Would you pit them against the Four Seasons? Nothing against the Four
I
Seasons.
wonder. I tell you, there's somebody I know that watches my channel. George, Music for All Four Seasons is the name of his channel. He loves the
Oh,
Four
nice.
Seasons. And I had actually knew a guy that wasn't this person George, but in my record store, I met a guy a long time ago that was such a big Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons fan. He insists if it wasn't for the Four Seasons, the Beatles wouldn't have had success because they were on VJ for the Four Seasons. I'm like, I have to disagree respectfully, but that's a great album
That's a great cover, right?
collectible.
The the best VJ cover, and mind you, all of these VJ albums still have that same introducing the
The
Beatles
same
album.
record
They
is
just
in there.
changed the cover.
Yeah.
This I'd say is the best one, and this one I'll explain. The cover is presented so well. There's actually pirate copies of this that don't open. It opens in like a
Hmm.
mini flap, and it has the
Yep.
biographies and some pictures. But on the back, it shows the four guys, and underneath like heart shapes so that girls can cut their pictures out.
Oh, I don't see your picture under there, Bob.
No, I didn't
Okay,
put my
you
picture
didn't
on
put
there,
you didn't put your picture. Okay, I didn't put mine on mine either. So
but I think whoever designed this was made a fabulous cover. I
nice.
think even if a teenager got this as a gift, even if they already had the album, I think they would appreciate this cover.
Yes, and
So
absolutely
I give them a plus for making this
nice one.
cover.
And of course, as a collectors, we can't resist a nice, interesting cover.
Right, right. And there were a couple of other VJs. In fact, one they went into their own exploitation of exploitation is this one, also from VJ. It just shows John, Paul, and George because they were the songwriters,
Yep.
and it's another band playing the music. But if you look at the cover, you would kind of think, oh, this must be the real thing.
Right. If you're not looking, you're not thinking. Look at that. That's amazing. And you can understand why people, whether it's kids or adults, I mean, just grabbing it and
Right?
not knowing what they have.
And then you had the other labels, which are real labels that were grabbing onto the Tony Sheridan tapes.
Hmm.
This was the Ain't She Sweet on Atco. It just
Hmm.
has, a couple of the cuts, the Beatles singing Ain't She Sweet, but the rest is by a group called the Swallows, but they're also doing some Beatles songs.
Hmm.
So, uh, because this is in big print, and then it says, and other great group sounds from England. Yes, it does say that, but this is all in big.
Yeah, a little tiny. The other part, gotta watch
You,
the fine print.
you kind of would
Mhm.
assume that this is
Beatles.
obviously, they somebody thinks they're getting the real thing here, and they did, but not the real stuff that they
Yeah.
wanted.
Right.
Um, they got wise a year later and put this out on Atco's budget label. It says the Amazing Beatles. It's the same record, and now it's using this shot, even
Yeah.
if the faces are blank.
Right. Right. And other great English group sounds.
MGM Records, a very popular major label at the time, also got into the act.
Yeah.
Here you've got the Beatles in such a big name. And again, it has My Bonnie. This one does not have Ain't She Sweet, but they got a hold of My Bonnie. So that's on
Yeah.
here, and Cry for a Shadow. Uh, Otherwise, it's pretty much, well, it has Why. Otherwise, it pretty much has things that the Beatles have
So
nothing to do with.
you don't get at least get an actual Beatles vocal. You don't get the John vocal on "Ain't She Sweet" at least on that then,
Right,
right?
right. I mean, you hear them a little bit on My Bonnie,
By
but
Bonnie.
I'm sure this was a disappointment.
Yeah.
But see, what I'm trying to show, even showing these albums, is the fact that the name is so big that
Yeah. Sure.
you don't, you can't miss that.
A lot of times people use the term cash grab. They always tell me, but and I always say, "Oh, stop, stop." But that's a cash grab. That definitely is a cash grab. But it's fun though, fun.
But now we can go into some of the stuff that just shows, and remember, all these records that I'm showing, except that one I mentioned, the Amazing Beatles, came out in '64. As well as this, the
Ah,
granddaddy
yes,
of them all in these. Whoops, let's see. There we go.
yeah. Advertising. I want to hold your hand, of course.
Right, but by the Bugs, but it still says Beetle Beat, even if
Yeah,
it's spelled wrong.
spelled with an E, two E's, double
And
E.
it does give you the impression of Meet the Beatles because of the blackened picture.
Yeah,
They say it was recorded in England and it has a Liverpool sound, but this reportedly was recorded in New Jersey. And also, Gary Wright played on this. Gary Wright, who
uh,
just passed
we
away
just
recently.
passed.
Yeah,
Bob. It's funny because you look at a picture these days, all these decades removed, and you say, "Oh, that's not the Beatles." But for some people, just the Beatles were just starting out. They might have mistook them for the Beatles, at the time, off the stuff, off the supermarket shelf or something.
right, right. And that's just it's not only that, these records were all on budget labels. So when you went through a budget bargain bin, here's one It has an 88 cents sticker still on it.
Wow, lovely.
But when you see Beatlemania on the top, you see, remember the four iconic mop tops?
Yep, there it
You're,
is.
you're not necessarily looking that it says the group's name is the Liverpools.
Yeah,
In fact, you might just think, oh, yeah, they came from Liverpool.
yeah, right, right. It's Liverpool, England, where they're from. That's it.
And that this is a perfect example of what the buying public now. I'm sure kids could get uh, the wrong idea and think this is the real thing. But a
Absolutely.
lot of times, these records, even if they had a bin of these budget labels at a record store, it usually was off to the side because they knew the people who were buying these, and these budget labels always put out some budget soundtrack album. So they knew they didn't want to spend the 298 plus for the real thing, but they didn't mind having at least to hear the song, even if it was somebody else.
Hmm.
So that's where these came into play. But some of them you're just like, what were they thinking when they saw this? This is an instrumental.
Uh this one
But
I don't have, by the way. This is really cool to me.
this is on Diplomat,
Yeah.
and it's by Al Goodman and his orchestra. But when you see and there's many records this company Diplomat used with this same sort of theme to it,
Yes,
with the red cover,
yes,
the mop top,
I
the
love
Ringo
how it says
theme,
Ringo's theme. I just love that selling point. Ringo's theme. It says on it. I
right?
love that.
You almost kind of wish United Artists had like a picture sleeve or something that looked like that,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
did
yeah.
something with it.
That's beautiful.
And yet here it is with the budget. So some of them were quite surprising with that. Well, of course, we didn't go into this
Ah,
one.
yeah.
This is actually the Beatles. This is real.
Yeah. Is that some of those were counterfeit and some legit? Is that the deal with that? Or are they all counterfeit? I don't know. Do you
Uh,
know?
this is one of the records that actually did get sued back then. I guess
Oh,
because
oh.
they actually used the real music.
Hmm.
Um, I found this. I got this sealed in like the early '70s,
Oh, wow.
and when I played it, this has the Ringo version of "Love Me Do."
Oh, cool.
I was like, I never heard this. What is this?
Yeah, and that's
Right?
really I have that. I don't I have that. I don't remember being the Ringo version on Love Me Do, which is amazing because really you couldn't, right, in America you wouldn't really hear that unless you had to have the British single
You wouldn't
originally.
have it, no. So this was interesting, and yet you can still see the same thing. It doesn't say the Beatles at all, but the telltale mop tops are there.
Okay.
There's just so many I could show. Goofy ones.
Oh, show them.
Yeah.
Make my mouth water a little bit.
Well, there's a lot of them by Rondo of the
Wow.
Liverpool Beats. There was different covers like this. This is from Pickwick, which was actually out on Long Island.
Hmm.
Um, and some have said that they think Lou Reed plays on this, but no,
Oh.
he's actually he was signed to Pickwick as a musician and a songwriter. He's on a Beach Boys
Hmm.
sound alike record. Of all things. But there were several covers like this that showed this picture and it said Beats or whatever.
Yeah.
But you could see it doesn't say Beatles, but everything about it, Merseyside sound, live in Britain, four guys. It just gives off a vibe to it.
Listen, Bob, with the Beach Boys one by the Surfside that's the one you're talking about with right with
Yes, yes,
Surfside. I heard that album within the last year or something at the record store. We
really.
played it. I thought it was like I didn't know what the heck I was listening to. I was like, oh, this is. I was laughing at some of the renditions of some of the songs.
Uh,
It was kind of funny to me.
what's interesting about that is there's not too many acts that have these kind of records that was like this.
Yeah.
I have a couple of Kingston Trio
Oh,
knockoffs.
really? Really? Kiss and Trio
Um,
did.
there was actually two Monkeys knockoffs.
Oh, the monkeys
Synchronicity.
also. Why am I don't remember those. Why am I drawing a blank on those? I remember some instrumental albums, but I don't remember. That's
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah. No, no. What they did on those, instead of like Mary Mary, a song was titled Sally Sally, and
Uh,
Your Auntie Griselda, there was a song called Your Uncle Grizzly. But again, that's a different group. But they took it even to another extreme. Uh, this is from England, but this is sort of like that Beats cover that I showed you. But what's
mm,
odd is it says it's by Billy Pepper and the Pepper Pots.
well, that's before Sergeant Pepper.
For Sergeant Pepper. Isn't that crazy to see something that says Pepper,
Yeah, yeah,
before that, and it has something to do with
yeah.
Beatle wise? Just wow. So that I had to have just because
Oh
it
yeah, and that one I don't
had
think I've
titles to
seen either. That one. No, that's a cool one.
it. This one by B. Brock and the Sultans do the Beatles. They took some surf instrumentals and just kept changing the titles to like your your barber is a Beetle too. There's Do the Beetle, Feed the
Mexican
Beetle,
Beatle.
Mexican Beetle. Everything has to do with the Beatles,
Wow.
and of course they do. I Want to Hold Your Hand, which is kind of eh.
But
Now,
you're gonna advertise that one.
now of all things, this album I have a couple of copies of it. Um, there were pictures of the real Beatles taped all over the cover, front and back, and the back really has nothing special.
Mm.
But so the way I see it is the girl who owned this, she probably got it from her dad or whatever, and she says, "But Dad, that's not the Beatles. That's not what I want. It says I Want to Hold Your Hand. That's the song you like. It says Beatles. Take
Yeah,
it. It's yours."
yeah.
And so she tried to disguise it as well as she could.
That's cool. That's interesting stories. Well, I love those little stories.
Uh, Other groups like the the Manchesters,
Oh, sure. They had a couple, didn't they? I
they
mean,
had a couple. Um,
yeah,
I know
there it is.
somebody who had this in their collection, and they didn't even realize until like later on in life when they looked at it, they were like, "Oh, I always thought this was a Beatle album."
Yeah, that might have been the first one I ever got. Maybe I don't know. I mean, and I also want to find out. Well, I kind of know because I think I've heard you talk about it. What the first one you had? If you're going to show the first one you had, that would
Oh, I
be
will, I will.
okay. Well,
But
wait then.
the
uh,
Manchesters, this was a volume two.
yeah, I love that cover. That's one of the covers I love.
It's a colorful cover, except you know, there's no drummer unless this is supposed to be Ringo, and
It looks a little
there's
like
three
Ringo,
guitars, and I don't know.
and that could easily fool people, right? That one.
Definitely, definitely.
I mean, it looks a lot like the
And
Beatles.
then they put out a third volume of this. It's kind of similar to the first one, only that
Right?
now it has a Hard Day's Night on the top, and they added one new song.
There's a hard day's night. They got? What song do they got there? She
Well, this
loves
one
you.
has it does have "Please Please Me," "I Want to Hold Your Hand," and "She Loves You." So there's four Beatles songs on here. Well, "My Bonnie" is on here too, so I guess five.
Hmm.
And
I-
actually, a couple of the songs that are on here that are uh, other people's recordings or songs aren't too bad. I actually would put these on to give a listen, but some of their other songs are better than actually listening to the songs by the Beatles. Now, in the same fashion, also by that Diplomat label, I don't know who the heck was buying this. Is
oh, I love that one. I love
Beatle
that.
Buddies? Do you have this one?
Yeah, I do. Not too long ago I found it.
Because it's some of the same recordings and same songs that are by the Manchesters.
It looks like cell block, like a cell block. Prison, woman's prison, or
Now,
something.
in selling these, okay, here's a good example. Who was this being promoted to? Who was supposed to buy this? The father? The if the father was buying this, would he want like his mother-in-law on the cover?
Yeah, yeah, right. I don't know. That's interesting. I mean, I don't know because that's
I'm
and you
sure
can't
that
get,
they're not the ones who were singing on the record.
but you can't, that one you can't get away with as easy. I mean, some of the other Beatle covers you might get fooled or something, but that one not so much.
Right. So who was buying this and who wanted this? I don't know, but
Beats
it's out
me.
there. In fact, the back says, "We think that their names and sound will last long after the Beatles are gone."
Yeah, right. Well, it hasn't.
It hasn't. Then you were talking about. I actually had this was my very first, and this is
Ah,
still
there it
the
is.
original copy. This
Yeah,
is the first, really. This was the first technically Beatle album I ever owned.
yeah. Oh, the first one ever.
As a kid, yes, yes, I was given this as a kid. And did they do Beatles songs on the Alvin and the Chipmunks show? I don't remember,
Mm.
but I obviously heard them on the cartoons because I remember seeing the cartoons when they were originally on. Um, but I know I watched Alvin and the Chipmunks too, so somehow this was bought for me.
Well, had you heard the Beatles themselves before that, or that's the first time you ever heard anything Beatley? Do you remember?
Um, I believe I did, and that's why. Well, like I said, I heard the songs on the cartoons.
Oh, oh,
So I
okay.
knew the Beatle versions on there,
The Beatles
but this was
cartoon.
the actually first record I had with that
I see.
on there. But now this concept was even taken to the extreme. Uh, this is from Winecoat, where they
Yeah.
took it's is it four chipmunks? Is it four squirrels? Is it four gophers? We're not really sure, but
Yeah.
it lists all the Beatles songs, but it doesn't give a name. It doesn't say anything. And the fact the back is kind of plain.
Yeah. I love it.
But
Stuff
that
I
took
like.
the
I love. I eat it up.
that took that to that other end by copying a copy, and then of course Diplomat had to go ahead and one with the Grasshoppers. Now
Yeah.
Diplomat did have they mostly put out children's albums under Peter Pan label.
Mhm.
And the Grasshoppers were one of their so-called acts that were like the Chipmunks. In fact, there was other albums. There's like a Christmas album with the Grasshoppers, but by this point, they didn't even put the name Beetle on it. As you can see, there's the that mop top
Yeah.
logo
There's a
on it,
symbol.
even on the back. And again, uh, the songs on here are basically the same songs that you heard on the Beatle Buddies and the Manchesters, just that the voices are sped up.
There you go. Interesting stuff. I love it.
And let's see, just go into some of the ones as I go along here. Here's the Bear Cuts,
The
Swing and
bear cuts. Right.
Mania.
Exactly.
Yeah, this is the one that has Liverpool Stomp.
Sorry
Uh,
about this. I'm getting a
oh,
little distraction here. I thought
that's
I took
okay.
care of this. Damn. So sorry. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
And it's got the little bugs on the bottom with the sort of kind of caricatures. But again, even that, well, of course, it's got Beatlemania in big print. But
Right.
it's just incredible how much of these sort of records came out. Even this one, which said
Oh yeah, I got that one. Yep.
Mania. Now look at the A. The weird thing about the A is you can sort of see an L in it. You can sort of see an E. It's
Oh,
sort
I
of
never noticed it. Beat a mania, kind of.
it's
But there is,
Beatlemania, yeah. But
yeah,
when you
E at
could look
the
at it
end.
wrong and think it's
Right. Right.
Beatlemania,
Is that
and
something?
then of course it's got the screaming girls on the front.
And I didn't notice that. I tried. Well, obviously, I was going to get it no matter what for my collection, but I like the screaming girls on it, so that's the first
Yeah.
thing that caught my eye. But I didn't notice that trick with the like you say, with the E and the L.
Or you could go to a real extreme and you got the Beagle and the four Liverpool Wigs.
Never heard of this. Hmm.
Oh, this one's terrible. The their version of "I Want to Hold Your Hand." Um, I said, and not to be insulting to them, it sounded like it was recorded on the in the hallway at the Beatle Fest with a group
Really? Uh,
singing along to.
Hey, maybe give them some ideas. Maybe some of those Beatle Fest singers.
And this is where some of these things come off with that show the Beatles in a good fashion is when you hear some of these covers, the drummers are a bit off. Uh, the songs aren't exactly right. Well, it's possible the musicians were rushed into recording this to get
Mhm.
this out as soon as possible.
Before the popularity fades, maybe.
Right, right. And I don't think that they got it. Like I've explained, my mother back then had a couple of Beatles sheet music uh, papers, and she was trying to play the songs, but she could not get the beat and she could not get the timing, so it never sounded right. So
Mm.
she stopped trying to play them because she couldn't play them. And I think that's what some of these records really reveal is that the real Beatles had a certain something. That's why it was Beat instead of Beet, because they really had uh, uh,
They've got that something. They've
they had that something that we needed.
the
Uh,
Beatles.
this is a rare one that I hadn't shown before, just because it's from Canada. It says the Beatlemania. Now think of the fact that with the Beatles in Canada came out as Beatlemania with the Beatles. If you covered the rest of this up, it
Hmm.
looks very similar to that first Canadian
And
record.
I'm noticing like "Hold Me Tight." That's unusual for one of these. Am I right?
Yeah, yeah.
And
Well,
also, "I Want to Be Your Man."
there's another group. Where is it?
Because you're used to the usual ones by now. "I Want to Hold Your Hand" and "Love Me
Right.
Do."
Well, then when you have Gene and the Notes, this
Oh,
whole album is just all Beatles. There's no information. The front cover's the same as the back. Um,
I saw her standing there.
and they do everything on this,
Not a second time.
even Don't Bother Me.
Oh wow, yeah.
So was this sold in stores or was this sold by Gene and the Notes like at a concert or something?
Uh,
But I don't know how they got away with putting that out like that.
Out of the car, maybe. Who knows? Af Out of the car after the show.
So that's a different way of looking at it. Others absolutely absurd
Uh,
is this one by the Liverpool Kids.
yeah.
Now they spelled Beetle wrong with the two T's, so they must have had the VJ45 that was mislabeled like that in order to make this cover.
Well, instead of doing, am I right? Instead of doing double E, they just went double T this time. No, maybe to change it off, to change, make it not copying the Beatles.
Possibly right. Well, they talk about the Beatles on the back cover and they spell it right there. But
Oh,
again, if you're trying to market this, why are you showing these three old guys with Beatle wigs? And it
yeah,
talks about that they're four young men. Again, we have a problem with addition.
yeah. That's only not that is overestimating how many.
And we had this one by the Schoolboys, which I
Mhm.
think is by the same label as this Liverpool Kids one. And this too mentions that they're four men. Well, uh,
You got five this time.
I think this. Be truthful, this picture looks more like it could be the Animals than the Beatles. But again, if this is in the bin and you have a record in front of it or something, you might see this
Mhm.
and not this, and just pick it up and buy it.
Well, that's all. That's all. They're all designed like that, really, in a way. Most of them trick you.
And as you could see, they all were sold cheaply. So So it was easy to do that. And even the major labels had budget labels that would stick their own stuff in there. And these were some. One time, people thought this would be a collectible. This is on Tower, which is actually a budget Capital label,
Yeah, that's a nice one.
but it's not them. But a lot
Yeah,
of
well,
people at one point thought that
you
it
can
was instrumental.
easily mistake that.
They thought this was like the Beach Boys Stack of Tracks album.
Yeah.
They figured that this was just instrumental copies, of the actual Beatle tracks, but it
Mhm.
isn't. But then even London put out this one, the Sing and Play Beatle kit. All you need is to get these guitars and Beatle wigs, this
Yeah,
record, and boom, you're the Beatles.
gotta have the wigs. Never mind the guitars.
So it just adds up to a fun year. And how did people understand, what they were exactly buying?
Yeah,
Like if you're a Santo and Johnny fan,
yeah.
did you buy this because down here you finally saw Santo and
Well,
Johnny?
I bought that. Anything Beatles related. No sleepwalk on there,
No,
huh?
but even the real pictures are on the back.
Yeah.
If I did an album of Bob Dylan covers and I put a picture of Bob Dylan on the back, you think I'd get away with it?
I don't know.
But let's see, Wing Mercury. Mercury was a popular label.
Mm.
This one again, it's got the Liverpool beat sung by the Weasels. It says down here in little print, but it's got all the Beatle titles in big print
Yeah.
up here.
Oh yeah, look at the other songs too. Karina. Yeah.
But you can just see how deceiving these all were. And then you say, well, was anything like that? Actually, I had been asked, wasn't there something like that in the 45s too, to also deceive? Well, believe it or not, yes and no. There was a label called Hit Records
Hmm.
that put out budget 45s, and they would do covers of all different things. This happens to be a monkey song, but they would always
Let
put
me blow this up
the
a little because it's
oh,
okay.
they would always put the name of the band, like this is the Jalopy Five.
Oh yeah,
They,
D.W. Washburn. Sure.
yeah, but they wouldn't put purposely, that it's the Beatles or something like that. They would say that it wasn't. Okay, on the album covers they do show the names, but I just say, because they show it in such small print that there's just no way around it. I mean, how do you buy
Not
something
all.
like this
Yeah, yeah.
and think it could really be uh, the Beatles or even close?
Well,
Because,
something like that, maybe just capitalizing it. Well, they are capitalizing on the Beatles, but the Beatle beat, like they have things that maybe sound Beatle-ish, and
right, even in the comedy
yeah,
world,
yeah, that's on Swan. That one, I
yeah,
have that one.
yeah. Oh, it's terrible.
Yeah, yeah, I have. I got that at the flea market. I think I found that at a flea
You
market once.
found it. Ah.
Oh yes, so not all of them, but a good amount of them. Some of them make me want to. I still got work to do to try to get some more.
um, and Capitol, on every other of the Capitol albums, they would always show the Beatles songbook,
Ah, sure.
which, for the parent side, why don't they get this and listen to it? It's not that bad. But
No,
when you
no,
look at this cover, here's this looks almost exactly the same, except it's a
different color,
different
really.
different color.
What are there? Five of them all together? Do you have?
No, is there that many of this
I
too?
think there's
Wow.
five of them. Yeah, not with
Wow.
that, not with those covers, but I think there's something
But
like that.
again, even that, okay, it says it's the Mustang, but are you going to look at this or this? It's like you must get them at home. The political mailings in the mail,
Hmm.
they usually are like these big cardboard, one postcard type mailer. They know you're not going to read the whole thing, but there's certain parts of it that they'll put in big print
Oh
just to
yeah, that's
catch your eye.
advertising. You
And
know,
that's what these records do. They know you're not going to stand there and read the whole thing,
yeah,
and you're just going to get taken with it. So that's pretty much. I'm sure there's a couple that I've missed, but that's pretty much the way that that year went. Just
hmm
the insanity of all that stuff at one time. Uh, to even the point where you could disguise a group and call it the you know who group.
yeah, yep.
Funny about this is I see this was arranged and produced by Bob Gallo, who I think in the 60s for a short while he even managed Pete Best
Oh, I didn't know.
of
I
all
didn't know that.
things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he was responsible of that Best of the Beatles
Well,
album.
even that, right? Even that was try to get you best of the Beatles, and it's Pete Best of the Beatles.
It was, except that it's kind of true.
Yeah, yeah, but some people might have thought it was the best hits of the Beatles or something like that, the greatest of the Beatles.
True, true.
If that's what you're doing. So it's kind
So
of
just
tricky.
all the albums that came out, and then Capitol to round up the year of 1965. We still had the Beatles story,
Yeah, that might have some Hollywood strings stuff on it. I'm thinking maybe some instrumental
and like 20 seconds of the Hollywood Bowl.
of the
So we
Hollywood
actually
Bowl.
had a live thing come out back then, just very little.
Yeah,
And then
true.
at the end of the year, of course, here's Beatles 65, but it came out in 64.
Yeah, getting us
So,
ready for 65, I guess.
right. So you just see the wealth of material that came out in one year. First of all, amazing songwriters to put out that much uh, material in
Yeah,
one
what's that
year.
all about? I still wonder. That still boggles the mind sometimes. That
Much like people
happens.
say, they only were around for a short few years.
Yeah.
To me, 63 from 69 to them was like 20, 30 years.
I mean, it's certainly not, not like that anymore. Back then, there was more going on in a shorter time. Now it can take that long for a group to put out one album or something. You can go
Right.
10 years without an album, or 7 years or something. It
Right.
is amazing. Now, 1965. I mean, a lot of these. I mean, I recognize almost all of them, and I'm thinking, well, were there ones in '65 as well, or was this basically a 1964 thing? When they first were hitting.
The, there were a few. I mean, there's even some. I don't have them over here to look at the moment, but there was even some in '68 for Yell Submarine.
Hmm.
There was one in Canada, and there was a couple of Kitty albums too that showed the Yellow Submarine on the cover, and
Hmm.
basically disguised itself as like a soundtrack.
Oh, okay.
Um, in
Well,
Of course, in the early '70s, was it early '70s or late '60s? You had the Mass Marauders.
don't
Remember
know.
that whole thing?
No, I don't.
Rolling Stone magazine made like a hoax of a supergroup. Of an article where the Beatles, Bob Dylan, Donovan, uh, was it with a couple of Beach Boys? I don't know. There was a mixture of different people were supposedly having the supergroup, and they recorded this album,
Oh,
and it came out on D&E Records called the Mass
Mass
Marauder.
Marauders. I
And
remember Klaatu supposedly
right,
being the Beatles, but
well, that they Klaatu, they weren't doing that necessarily on purpose, although Capitol wrote on it because it was helping the album sell so well. They weren't going to let it out that it wasn't the Beatles. There were a couple of strange coincidences with that as to how they looked at that as the Beatles, um, especially with Ringo with the Klaatu uh, cover of
yeah, that he's a
the
favorite. I think
yeah.
he liked that stuff, Ringo, science fiction and stuff. Um. Anyway, I got before we go. Is there anything else that you're involved in, or you want to talk about coming up, or anything special that in the future?
Oh,
Other writing or articles or anything?
um, well, for Retro Fan Magazine, well, Michael Urey, the editor, uh, he was kind to get in the Beatle article as fast as he did. My next article for retro fan might probably be on Howard Johnson. So it's something quite different
Uh,
than the music.
this I got to be honest with you, I'd never heard of this before, and I appreciate getting this copy because this there's a lot of good stuff in here, not just Beatles related, but boy, this is nostalgia galore. This is really good
And
stuff.
it's very colorful,
Yeah,
and it's a nice read. All the issues are great.
yeah, you
It's
can get other issues here. The old past issues that have passed.
Yeah,
Really
there's
cool, really cool.
tomorrows.com, I think is the website.
All right. Well, I got to tell you something, Bob. I had a great time. I knew I would have a good time with this because I love collecting all this stuff. And of course, there's so many things that we didn't get to. I mean, there's instrumental albums, country albums. Chet Atkins picks on the Beatles. There's all kinds of things, that other forms where the Beatles had about them,
Right.
instrumentals, other artists doing things. Count Basie, all kinds of things. But
But
it was a
even that, those kind of albums I felt were a little different. Those
because
were
they're
more
legitimate. They're more
right,
legitimate.
right,
They're doing their own thing, but they're not trying to just knock off make a
right.
quick buck off the Beatles' popularity as it came out.
Like
It's
as a
not.
kid, I loved Sergio Mendez's version of "Fool on the Hill." Oh, I loved hearing that. Anytime I heard it, that when I finally got Magical Mystery Tour and heard the Beatles version, I was like, "Huh, doesn't sound the same to me."
Not
I
quite.
was so used to the way Sergio Mendes
Yeah.
did it.
Yeah. Well, I hope that you will come back another time and we'll have something else to talk about. It's been
I,
a pleasure having
I
you here. A
I'd
good
love
time.
to. We could get into many different things, and I collect all different other bands too. I've known different popular musicians. Met I used to write for Good Times magazine back in the
Yes.
'80s
Good
too,
times.
a local writer.
Yeah, still picking that up every now and then. Good times. All right. So, everybody, I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll be back with another show soon. So, thanks, Bob, and I'll talk to you
Thank you,
soon. And everybody, have a good
thank
day
you,
or
everyone.
night or
Enjoy.
whatever.
All right.
Cheers.